I mean, it's an amazing opportunity being a trustee, an employee trustee, because typically you can't have anybody on the board. Well, you can't have anybody on board, and we wouldn't ever recommend anybody in the senior management team because they already have significant influence in the business. So it's got to be outside that. So what you're talking about now is people that won't have experience of maybe running a department, let alone running a business. And you're going to pluck them out of their role and now sit them above the board of directors, controlling the board. It's an amazing opportunity to gain some incredible skills, but it's also an amazingly steep learning curve.
Okay. And the selection process for that person, it is not the founder or, business owner or directors who are choosing?
It's an election process, and it's an election process like any other. Crikey, not like any other. It's an election process where candidates put themselves up, they write themselves a bio. So we have a campaign with the smallest possible C. So, tiny campaign. We have a voting process, and then somebody's selected who wins the vote. That's an election that everybody understands in its simplest form. That's the only rigor that you have around your trustees at that point, in terms of, are they suitable to run the business? Because as a business owner, you're not allowed to have influence over that. So it doesn't matter if they're suitable to run the business or not. If they win the election, that's your trustee. So now it's typically up to your independent trustee to train these people. So can they read a profit and loss account? Can they read a balance sheet? Do they understand what a strategic plan is? Do they understand the components of that? Do they understand the implications of the decisions they're making? They typically would sign a non-disclosure agreement because they're now going to be given very privileged information, and they're going to be asked to make some difficult decisions. I mean, one of the decisions could be, actually, we're going to make the department that you're in redundant, including you. How do you vote for that as a trustee? Because as a trustee, you're representing the employees. So it's the best interest of the business, not the individuals. So you as a trustee, given the business case, would probably have to vote for your own redundancy.
You paint a very attractive picture.
It's one, absolutely, but it's one of the considerations.
Yeah.
But if you've got a growing business, you can then be saying, okay, here's an acquisition we're looking at.
Yeah.
So here's the acquisition pack. Here are the employees. Here's their customer base. Here's how it's going to, add something else to our business. And you service line, a new product stream, or bolster an existing department. Do you vote yes or no to the acquisition? I mean, if that's not something you're used to doing, if you're not used to, taking all that financial information and then thinking about the culture of the organizations being smashed together, it's a completely alien concept. So it's a lot of training required, but as I say, it's an amazing journey for, 2-3 years. And it's an amazing privilege that you get to be taken from your role and now effectively running a business. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, so I feel like the communication point and also the education and everyone in the business understanding what an EOT is and how it affects them. And, if you do that well and you do it right, it feels like, the business is going to run and it's going to be part of that statistic you mentioned earlier of these businesses that really do take off and become more successful after becoming an EOT. So, I know we spoke about this like lack of awareness around EOTs and, business owners not really knowing about it, so not seeing it as an option. But then once they are aware and kind of looking at who they can work with or who could help them to, make this a reality, typically our approach is quite different to who else they might see out there or hear talking about this.
It certainly is, yeah, because we're coming at it not only from being an organisation that's experienced it, lived and breathed it, and gone through the whole up and down with it, but also we have, because of that experience, know that The issues of legacy, the issues of communication are as important, if not more important, than the tax exemption, which in itself is very, very important. And it's more, all of those things are more important than have we got the legal paperwork right? Of course, we want to get it right, and it needs to be right. But the focus is not on that. It's on communicating to your employees and making sure your legacy is solid for the future.
Yeah, for me, it's a holistic approach. You need a tax advisor and a lawyer to work together effectively to put a trustee in place. So, technically to put it in place, to get all the documentation right, to get all of the clearances with HMRC, not that you can do clearances anymore, actually thinking about it from the last budget, but everything needs to be in place so that technically your trust is, and all the surrounding documents are accurate and actually reflect the wishes of the founders and are best for the business. Great. But that's just a technical mass of paperwork, a dozen documents. It's kind of valueless without the wraparound. To be able to take your employees on the journey, the change of culture that is needed within the business in order to make the EOT valuable isn't going to happen because people have read 200 pages of legal documentation. It's about the quality of the communication. It's about taking every single member of staff on this journey up to the point of doing the EOT, and then the bigger journey that happens after that. So it's taking everybody else along with you, business owners and employees together, all have to go on this journey together. And, as I said before, getting the legal paperwork right is really, really important. But it's kind of just it's a nicety, it's an annoyance that has to be done. The value comes from the communication with the people. That's the bit that is key.
Okay, so if there is, this might be a hard question, if there is one thing that you would like a business owner who is looking at this and thinking about planning an exit to take away, what would your key, one or two things or pieces of advice be?
Well, for me, the one thing is legacy with a tax exemption. So that's two things, but it's legacy. It's the only mechanism, sure mechanism. If anything is sure, but it's the only sure mechanism of making sure that what you've built up is maintained and stretches into the future beyond your involvement, because that day will come when it is fully run by the employees you've passed it on to.
Thank you.
I can do nothing but agree with you. The legacy is the most important point. It is, as I said earlier, being able to not just look your employees in the eye 2 years down the line, but even just at yourself in the mirror in the morning. The trade sale, 99% of the time comes with, a big chunk of your people disappearing from the business. Can they get other roles? Maybe, probably. Can they get other roles that are as fulfilling and on the same salaries? Who knows? Can they get any roles at all? Who knows? Do you want to do that to the people? The people that you've spent, from my point of view, 18 years building a business with, can I basically say to them, well, I've got my money. Thanks very much for all your hard work. I know that most of the board will probably lose their jobs in 18 months' time because they're definitely all duplicated. Most of the senior management team will probably have a trade-off with their opposite number in the new business. All the administration staff will go, all the overhead staff will go, and then we'll probably lose 20, 30, 40% of the fee-earning staff. I don't know how you can do that. I don't know how you can spend 18 years with a group of people building a business and then basically whipping the rug out from underneath them. I couldn't do it, and most of the business owners I've talked to are in the same position where they're kind of like going, I can't retire because I can't do a trade sale because I know what it would do to my team. And my guys do not have the financial horsepower between them to do an MBO. So I'm kind of stuck. I can't do anything else. So I can't retire. So I'm here for the next 5-10 years in the business, running it, because I know I can't get that exit.
They could do an EOT.
But they can do an EOT. I say best kept secret.
Thank you. So these questions are more for internal staff. There's just 3 left. So the first one is, what kind of support do clients need after an EOT is in place, especially around education for trustees and employees?
There's 2 elements there that are quite distinct. So I'll take the trustee element and you can take the employee element. Okay. So trustees, the big thing for trustees is they are going to be taken from a role in a business and elevated to a position where they are now effectively making sure that the board of directors is doing the right thing the right way. So effectively marking their homework. There's a set of parameters wrapped around that you know the trustees have to work within, but the skill set required is understand a strategic plan, understand how the business is developing now and the tactics that are being used, and make sure they are aligned with that strategic plan. Look at the financial data that's coming out and make sure that, again, that is aligned with the tactics and the strategic plan. Look at the balance sheet, make sure the business is, you know, it's got the financial health that it requires to be successful in the long term. Those are probably skills that the individuals that are being taken on as trustees do not have. So it's quite a big development exercise that needs to be done with those trustees to bring them through so that they do have the right skills to be able to participate at that level.
Okay, and who could help them to do that? Is that something that we can help with?
We can absolutely help with that. You know, business advisors, accountants that we have can understand how to understand the profit and loss account, understand what a balance sheet looks like and what a good one looks like and what a bad one looks like. Business advisors we've got can help understand the strategic plan and how the tactical decisions are being made and whether they're aligned with the strategic plan. And myself as a trustee here and in other places, I have lots of experience of being a trustee. So again, I can help with that training process.
Great.
Okay. From an employee's perspective, it's being attentive and remembering what it is that you are now part of. So that looks like, yes, this you know, every 6 months or however, whatever the rhythm is. Yes, I remember how this is calculated. I know that this is something that we now have an expectation of in terms of are we going to get a bonus? Are we in that position? But more importantly than that is encouraging your colleagues and encouraging them to do the best that they can and achieve the goals that they've got. And hopefully they'll do that to you as well, so that basically everybody knows we're pulling in the same direction. And that is not the responsibility solely of the board and the senior management, it's everybody. Okay, so important part of that is knowing what you're entitled to. And that is information. As Mike said, it's vital that employees are aware that, no, we now own this business. So we're entitled to updates on financials, updates on strategic decision making, and that is that is something which employees need to be aware of. And as advisors, we can ensure that the ongoing process with the founders who have sold is to ensure that, and remind them that that communication needs to happen with their employees, that they can send those messages and reinforce that.
Okay, so that would be more of the like business advisory piece and that's kind of a long-term, would that be a long-term relationship that we would then hold to keep things going?
Yes, I think as we've said, is this whole advisory piece of putting an EOT in place is, yes, there's a huge amount to be done beforehand, but there's just as a significant amount afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. And what should people be listening out for in conversations when they're speaking to clients? Things that they might mention, which they should then think an EOT could work here, or.
I think it's anybody who's looking at succession planning, number one, if that comes out. Any hint of a, still doing this kind of, how am I ever going to, how am I ever going to get out of this? Typically there'll be somebody who may be over 50, doesn't have to be, but could be somebody who's therefore starting to look into retirement. So there's that. There is probably a sweet spot of the number of employees, which makes it manageable and effective, which you could put anywhere between 10 and 50. I don't know, but
Yeah, somewhere between 2 dozen, 3 dozen employees, somewhere would be the sweet spot. You could do it with 10 employees, and we did it with 50. So it's perfectly possible, but there are a lot more relationships to manage. There are a lot more people to bring up to bring their knowledge up, and the speed of decision making needs to come up too.
Yeah. So in addition to that, is this company profitable? Is there going to be a value there? Because at the end of the day, the company needs to be valued to give the business owner the exit that they want. So is there profit there? And very importantly, is it a cash generating business? So look at those 3 areas, I think.
Yeah. Okay, and then what about if it is a family-owned business and there are different generations in the business? Would you then be looking at a different kind of succession planning?
Well, there are some technicalities around family-owned businesses, which I'll give you a moment or two to remember what the numbers are, the percentages are. There's no reason why you can't do it in a family-owned business between generations. But the key thing here is you're not giving it to the next generation. You're now selling it to all the employees. So it won't be that generational business anymore. So the EOT does basically cut that off. If it's been, and sons and daughters and family and, it now cuts that across because it's now all employees. Mm-hmm. But there's no reason why that can't be done, apart from, I can't remember what the percentage is. Is it 40%? If there's more than 40% of one family in a business, it can't be an EOT.
Do you know, I don't know that. I've not come across that.
It's some funky number like that from memory. It's in the depths of legislation. But one of the really interesting things, which I find is quite mean, but I understand it, is if you had a brother, sister, mother, father, son, daughter, niece or nephew in the business, then they can get an employee distribution, but they're not allowed to have any value from a final sale, if there is one, because they're deemed to be exempt as if they were a business owner. They may have no shares whatsoever, but they are just deemed to be an owner, so they're not allowed to get any value from an exit.
But they wouldn't also receive money from the...
They do get the regular distribution, the profit share every year, because employees have to be treated as a class. So they're an employee, so they're in. But then any future disposal, they wouldn't get any value from the company.
Yeah. So another thought on family-owned businesses is that, in my experience, family-owned businesses can go on from generation to generation, but typically there will be a point at which there's a generation that goes, no, I'm not interested in that anymore. So looking out for those businesses, could be a point of at which we can have that conversation about EOTs. And there's no reason why some of the family can't still be business owners, the minority shareholders. But the key is that control on a shareholder level has to go to the employees.
Okay, great. And my last question was about size and profitability, but I think we covered the size point with number of staff. And then I can't remember if you said there was a level of profitability or a value, like number per person in the business.
There aren't any hard and fast rules, but what you need to have visibility of is that Financial Freedom Day, for two reasons. One is because that's a really big incentive for the employee base, and the second is that's actually paid the owner, the founder, back their money. If you look at a business and best case Financial Freedom Day is 25 years away, it's probably not going to be a candidate for this, mainly because none of those employees are likely to be there on Financial Freedom Day, and most business owners don't want to wait 25 years for the money. Mm-hmm. So that's just not going to be viable, but that's a product of numbers.
Okay, so and presumably you can go in and figure this out once someone has identified a business they think might be a good candidate for this. You would then have a conversation to see whether it really is a good fit.
Yeah, it's like anything that we sell and anything that we do, it's all about identifying at that level, and then putting the team in. Yeah. Off we go.
Yeah, and our reality is, we have the accounts for pretty much every single organisation that we work with. If we're selling them only HR services, for instance, then we're probably not going to have the accounts, but we can ask for a copy of those. And with this year's and last year's accounts, we can probably tell in 10 minutes, look across the top of your thumb in 10 minutes and say, actually, yes, this is a viable candidate or not. And if it is a viable candidate, great. And if it's not, we would need to do these things. We would need to see these differences in order to make it a viable candidate.
Okay, and who are the key points of contact for anyone who might find a client and they think it's worth talking to? Is it you and Mike, or other people in the business?
Okay, certainly they can talk to me and Mike. Definitely talk to Mike. Definitely talk to me, and talk to Jess. So Jess Cowling, that would be a good point, a good place to go. Anyone else?
I think as a starting point that, say, you Jess and I, is a good place to start. And any of the three of us can probably tell, say, in 10, 15 minutes from looking at the accounts, whether it's a viable target or not for an EOT. So let's have a look.